What's going on, everyone? My name's Eric, and today on the channel we're going to be going back down the Frankenstein rabbit hole. If you haven't seen that original video, I'm going to link to it right up here so then you can check it out after this one if you want to learn even more about the Frankenstein. Since I've been spending so much time with that Frankenstein, I was actually reminded that I actually downloaded like a preamp VST plugin version of the Frankenstein years ago, and I just totally forgot about it until the real deal actually showed up. I was then thinking like, well, how close can this plugin get to the real deal? So I'm going to put the real Frankenstein and the plugin version of the preamp section of the Frankenstein in a full demo mix using the same speakers and all of that good stuff. And we're just going to kind of go a little bit of apples to apples, apples to oranges, whatever you want to use for a comparison. But nonetheless, here is the Frankenstein and the free plugin version of that amp in a full demo mix. And that was the demo featuring the Frankenstein versus the actual free Frankenstein plugin. So now the signal chain was real simple. I had the Washburn USA D3, Bill Lawrence in the bridge. That guitar then went into my Seymour Duncan 805, which then went either into my interface for the Frankenstein plugin. And then on screen right now, you're going to see the signal chain that I used just to actually capture the sound of that Frankenstein. And then otherwise, if it was not going into my interface, it was then going into the real Frankenstein, then into my 2 notes capture. Both of those setups use the cab section from Neural DSP John Petrucci with my custom IRs that are capturing my Eminence Legends and Texas Heat speakers from my Frankenstein cabinet. So now let's pull both guitars out of the mix and let's hear them on their own, just isolated guitars, center pan, everything like that. I'm gonna highlight on screen which one is either the VST or which one is the actual real amplifier, and then I'm gonna put them together and then let you be the judge of which tone you like the best, or generally just how a plugin compares to a real tube amp. So now, at the end of the day, I do want to say that I really love the Frankenstein amp. Again, it's an amp that I've wanted to try for a very long time, and I was very pleasantly surprised when I was able to actually plug it in and mess with it and live with it for a little bit, and it just kind of reaffirmed that I would love to own one of these amps at some point in my lifetime. And even reading all of your comments on that initial Frankenstein video, it seems like there's a lot of people who really love those amps as well. But the thing is, not everyone is able to go out and buy one of these amps because they're hard to come by and they are a little bit on the expensive side. And honestly, just living with a tube amp in this day and age, when living spaces are getting tighter and tighter, and even jam spaces and the ability to crank up a tube amp is just getting slimmer and slimmer, it does make living with a tube amp a little bit harder to do in some cases. And even though we do have some modern tech like load boxes that make recording a tube amp or even just living with a tube amp a little bit easier, point of entry is still much higher than it would be by comparison to some actual plugin software. Now with that plugin, I will say it does get pretty close to that Frankenstein's actual signature sound. The mid-range and the low-end response is just a little bit off in my opinion, but it gets you in the ballpark. And even then, when you pair it up with like the same speakers, and maybe if you throw a couple other external like EQs on it, like I'm pretty sure you can get pretty well closer, or if not identical to the real deal. And even listening back to these isolated guitar tones, like it's pretty close. And if I spent a little bit more time like dialing in both the amp and the plugin to sound exactly like each other, sure, they probably would have sounded identical. And even though this is capturing the preamp section of the Frankenstein as best as it can, it kind of gets you in the ballpark by comparison to the real deal. And that's what I really want to highlight with today's video, is that if you don't have the budget for like the full-on tube amp, there's free options like this plugin, and it's going to get you pretty well there for the most part. Sure, you might have a bit of a harder time trying to use it live, but if you're just trying to get into that ballpark tone realm of maybe these boutique amps that you just can't really get access to, this is a pretty sweet way to do it, and I just wanted to pass it on to you. And at the end of the day, if you are a big Dimebag fan and maybe the budget isn't there for a tube amp or just an amp in general that you can't crank up all the time, maybe you're going to have the budget for a free VST, which I will link down below, and you can try it for yourself. And I encourage you to use the plugin with some different speaker or cabinet IRs and then just see what kind of tones you get with it, whether they are related to or not related to Dimebag. But the whole point of this, have some fun with it. Here's a free plugin and it's pretty deadly, and yeah, just go have fun and make some music at the end of the day. And that's gonna do it for today's video. Let me know in the comments down below if you like the real amp sound, or if you like the actual plugin sound, or if you just learned something new. If you like this video, make sure you give it a thumbs up. And if you are new to the channel, this is your first time checking out one of my videos, please consider subscribing. Got tons more videos like this on the channel, as well as other guitar related content. And if you really like what I do, make sure you hit that notification bell so you don't miss a single video that I upload. Thanks for checking this out, and I'll see you next time.